Okay, hopefully this all worked. This is my first time setting it up start to finish, and I am not the boomer of the show. This is episode 27 with Jim. How do you say your last name, Jim?
Paolino.
Paolino.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I say it as Paolino if you're Italian. You say it as Paolino,
Oh,
but I only do it that way when I'm ordering from an Italian restaurant, so they give me good food.
you let it come out.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have ChatGPT write your bio? Let us know how it does here, Jim. Jim Paolino, there we go, is the CEO and co-founder of Lodestar, where he spent the last decade turning the chaos of closing costs into something that actually makes sense. A serial entrepreneur, industry mentor, and Philadelphia-based force of nature. Jim has helped modernize title insurance long before it was cool. When he's not leading Lodestar or launching new ventures like Settlewise, you'll find him advising the next wave of innovators or drawing on his years in e-discovery to solve problems most of us didn't know existed. Jim's superpower, making the most confusing parts of real estate feel downright friendly.
I like that. Yeah, a little over the top, but that's what you get for these things. So,
yeah. ChatGPT says, "Oh, great, you're having Jim on." Like, kudos to you.
Peppy.
Someone's excited about it.
Yeah. So real quick, PK, I don't know if you know this, Jim and I, we've going back plenty of years. We did some stuff, gosh, pre-COVID. That's like
you integrated with us early on.
Yeah, gosh, and I think we're one of the first people. And then so right off the bat, something that the bio brought up and I want to talk about is Settlewise. And I remember hearing about, I think Elena was whenever I found out you were getting into, logically starting your own title company. But I'm just going to shut up there and let you tell us about that and how that got started and how it's going.
Yeah, you just kind of become a glutton for punishment, right? Having started a company, you're in a similar boat. So, we were probably about 10 years into Lodestar, and the company was doing well. And we realized from talking to kind of other folks like yourself, we have, for our size, a lot of clients because, closing costs are an important piece of the transaction, but they're only a really, really small piece of the transaction. So we sit at a cool point in the mortgage transaction when that loan estimate goes out, because there's like a 60 to 70% chance that someone's going to get a mortgage. So that means someone's about to sign a mortgage, pay a realtor, get title insurance, get an appraisal, get homeowners insurance, get patio furniture. There was all of this like pent up purchasing demand about to happen. And we're sitting right there and kind of collecting the toll. So we figured, how else can we leverage our position in the transaction to drive up more value to the folks we're looking at? I grew up in the title industry. From supporting fees, we support thousands of title agents. So we get asked about title fees all the time, supporting different states, directing folks to a title agent in a state they're not familiar with. I've hired from the title industry a ton because we just find folks with that title ops experience are really good operations people for us. So we had a depth of experience, the customer base that made sense, and we kind of sit at that right point in the transaction. And I also think it was an industry that is just kind of like a lot of things in real estate, an aging industry that is ripe for some innovation. So that's what we're trying to do, and still trying to find, what exactly that looks like at the end of the day.
Yeah, the title insurance space is one that I poke fun at a lot because I'm like, I paid title insurance on my new construction. It's like, we just want to make sure nobody else owned that property before you.
So I'm the dummy here. So
unfortunately, but I think one of the biggest problems too is the fact that like it would be like going to a doctor and saying like, "Hey, can you check me and make sure I never get sick again?"
Yeah.
Right, because it's not mitigating future risk. It's basically like doing it once and eliminating all risk.
Okay.
Right. So like it works a lot differently than other types of insurance, and because you're kind of one and done, there's still a claim rate, and like you're not paying it monthly, right? So it's misunderstood, and it really has become kind of like the whipping boy of real estate in a lot of ways. So sorry, PK, you were about to ask something.
No, I was just gonna say this. So the new company, Settlewise, what it does is it's title insurance. So you guys are checking to see if the property was owned by anybody else in the past or has a claim to own it, etc. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the initial title search process. That's like step one of doing the title search, getting the commitment together. Then then actually doing the closing, doing the escrow piece, having the money change hands at the end of the day, conducting the closing, and then kind of making sure everything gets recorded and is all set after the transaction gets completed.
Got it. Okay, cool.
So, trying to use basically our technology business, Lodestar, to drive title service business.
I'm sure you see this, but I've heard murmurs of this in the past. I'm sure, Mace, you've also seen this around like fraud or like emails that are going out to clients saying, "Hey, I'm your so and so title agency," but it's really some dude in Pakistan that's like, mimicking a email or making it look like, Settlewise with like two eyes, for example, right? Like things like that. How do you deal with that, and how do you combat it from your perspective?
From the communication with the borrower, also just following those lender instructions. You just have to have practice. Like you basically ignore those emails. You have the original instructions. Call the lender, confirm wiring via phone. Like there's just kind of best practices you can do to make sure that doesn't really happen. Usually the weak point is the realtor too, because they just don't have the same type of system as a lender would or a title agent. Sometimes they're personal emails. Sometimes they're a lot easier to mimic those.
Got it. Okay.
And yeah,
but there's no technology yet that's out there that's like a verifiable, like this is your Settlewise agent that's calling you or anything like that yet.
Not at the moment. We haven't. Not at the moment. That's a short answer. So
yeah. Also, we jumped the gun, but go ahead, Macy. We're gonna say
I was gonna say it's been pretty interesting seeing about my previous company, Momentum, how like one LO, he was complaining. He's like, I think I've been hacked. And then the IT guy's like, he goes in there and looks, and then he finds the common denominator because the emails were being timed so well. Well, it was basically the certain realtor, and like as soon as the closing, hey, you're closing, then it was just like emails looked like they were coming from him. They used his email signature, but you could tell there's a few, they were, it was pretty funny, the spoofing.
So folks know exactly what to do in the timing. I mean, also the end of the month for mortgage and title is crazy, right? So like if you're able to kind of get into the rush there, and to your point earlier, once the money's gone, it's gone. So it is really scary. It's definitely a larger problem.
Big dollar amount.
So how one thing we didn't ask, and then I think PK was about to say was, the line Andrew says, nobody says they want to get into mortgage tech whenever they're a kid. So how did you get pulled into the mafia that is known as the mortgage?
I've heard a lot of good stories around this. So I grew up in a family-owned title business up in Rhode Island, Res Title, that's still in operation. So I've been around this kind of space all my life. I remember when I was a kid climbing on filing cabinets. I remember seeing typewriters to type up policies instead of computers. And then I always had like kind of jobs around the title company, like in high school and in early college. I had to move all the filing boxes because they had to keep 5 years of paper records. So they basically had like a storage facility where they kept it all. So I basically had to like get a friend, get a U-Haul truck, drive from office to office, move boxes into a truck, go to the storage place, and lug them out.
So what did you go to college for? Like, it sounded like you were sucked in the title, but then you're like, I'm still going to maybe try to get out and go to college. Or
so I was, I had no interest in title at the time. Everyone thought, I always got asked if I was going to be a lawyer, like my dad who started the title business, and no interest in it. I was studying engineering at college at Lehigh University, and that was my 5th year. I was getting a grad degree, and I got a call from my dad saying, "Hey, we need to do this good faith estimate calculator. Like, I have no idea what it is, but can you like try to figure it out? Because we have to quote fees, and like it's required by law in like 3 months." So that was fall 2009.
2009.
Dodd-Frank. That in January 2010, the good faith estimate was going into effect. So during it was actually around this time, I think I looked over it with him when I was home for Thanksgiving. And then during my kind of semester break, just like locked myself in the office and just like coded something that kind of worked basically. And then they were live January 1st. And then that kept that helped them grow from being in 3 states to 33. It was a side job for me for a little while. I worked in, as you mentioned in the intro, e-discovery, which is like legal tech, for just a couple of years. And then I was at a business that was a little bit smaller. And I was like, if you guys can run a business, it can't be that hard. So I was always like around people running businesses in my family. I was fortunate in that regard. So I was like, let's just give this a shot, right? I saw all the rules from TRID coming into effect with the loan estimate. So it seemed like the same thing was repeating itself again. So it was 2013. I quit my job at the time in New York, took a 6-figure pay cut. I was like, I'll see that money again in a year. No problem. Brought in 2 friends, made all the small business mistakes imaginable, and just slowly figured it out. I didn't see that same salary for 6 years. Never mind what. Had to, so like brought in partners who weren't the right partners, didn't know how to sell, didn't know how to manage, didn't know how to price our product, didn't know how to scale it, right? So it took a lot of time to kind of figure out our niche. We started selling to title agents because that was my client base at the time. And then I slowly pivoted from that to selling to lenders. And that's where we've kind of found our niche.
Got it. So what were you selling at first? Was it around fees from?
It was like a website widget, basically. Yeah. Because that was what we had. We didn't have any integrations at the time. Also, like, I don't know if a lender would have even sold to us at that point in time anyway, right? So I was able to sell the kind of widgets to title agents, get momentum that way. And then a few years into that, it was like 2015, 2016. We were losing money. We had a friends and family round and just kind of bleeding money at the time. And slowly had to like let a co-founder go, cut all of our staff except for my other co-founder, our CTO. Just try to make it work. I remember the old director of sales at Calyx Point, Dennis Boggs. I was in a meeting with him in New York City at MBA Secondary. It was like some hotel room overlooking Times Square. And he was like, I think like some lenders might need this. You should integrate with us. And that was our very first LOS integration.
It's Calyx.
With Calyx. Yep, Calyx Point. And then we got lenders there. And then we kind of were able to kind of make the gamble to integrate with Encompass. This was a big expense for us at the time. It's only gotten larger, but then we were able to find the space with lenders because there's just a bigger pain. Like if someone is paying a title unsecured, it's a lender, it's not a title agent. So that was where we were able to just slowly kind of accumulate, build clients. Even pre-COVID, we had like 4 employees, but by the end of COVID, we had 14. So that was a big jump for us too, because as you know, the mortgage industry just kind of went crazy around that time. So,
yeah.
Jim, what'd you go to school for? What kind of engineering was that?
Information and systems engineering.
Okay.
I did a little bit of coding, enough to be dangerous, and then after I brought in my co-founder, I haven't really touched it since.
So you saw the paper side of the business at the beginning of your, just growing up as a kid in your house. I guess like what was the first piece of tech that you saw that you were like, oh, I actually want to go spend the next 4 or 5 years of my life studying how these things are built or developed and things like that?
I never really thought of it that way, to be honest. It was like I that would have made a lot more sense, quite frankly. Sure. But it was more. I think I was taking like math in high school, physics. I always liked that. I was like, I want to be an engineer. I was going to be a mechie. That was what I declared I was going in. And then like from looking at all of the other stuff I saw with information systems, which is part of industrial engineering, that you're just breaking stuff down into a system and making that run better. So like I always liked the idea of solving problems. As an aside, I was in 5th grade. We always had I remember this well. It was Friday math class was problem solving day. So they would say a word problem. We'd all have to solve it. I would usually try to be the first one to do it. But what I would do is when they first give the problem, I would get my notepad and start hitting it on my head while I'm trying to figure it out like this. And then I would solve the problem, write it down, give my answer, and be correct. And then the rest of the class, some of the other folks in the class started doing the same thing by hitting their head. I was doing it. So anyways, I always liked solving problems.
Nice.
And was always like really interested in that aspect of it. And like it's kind of served me well because anything can get broken down into a system and that can run better, right? That's a lot of what we do as entrepreneurs is like, how can we break this down and how can we make this work better? So that was that was kind of how I thought about it. And it also seemed like the most open-ended because, sitting there at 19 years old, I thought at some point I would maybe be interested in running a business. Didn't really know didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was like, this seems open-ended enough that I can kind of figure out, what I want to do from here.
I didn't know all the your college background. So it's my first time hearing that because I was also Mechie when I first went to school.
Yeah.
And then I switched to industrial engineering, which sounds like
very similar. Was that what was that switch like? Was it?
I love it. Like it felt so natural. Like like it just made sense.
Did they call it imaginary engineering at your school too? Because that was
they kind of shat on us. They were like, "Oh, these guys are like like business kids in like engineering school." But it was a good time. It became very natural and just kind of like made sense. Where I think it's not like that for everybody. So like the aspect of like systems and like breaking it down into components, like first principles thinking, like that all just kind of like
like what are the constraints of the system? What are you?
I love constraints. Yeah, like then you can just work backwards to find your solutions and whatnot.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. And Jim was his frat president.
Yeah.
Jim.
I found this out because of a recent little thing you did with Elena, and
the shotgunning video.
Yeah, and he shotgunned a beer like a champ.
My first time shotgunning in like 15 years. So.
And you crushed it.
It was a Bud Heavy too.
It was a Bud Light. I was like, is he really going to do that? I was like, I was impressed.
A lot of practice in college, but yeah, I was a fraternity president. My co-founder was in the fraternity too. He was the year after he was pledge master. So
okay,
nice.
Good times.
No, that was a cool experience too. I think the biggest thing that I learned from doing that is you're never going to solve a problem at 2 a.m.
I know the situation you're talking about. All right, guys, I think I got this.
It's like, calm down. We'll deal with this in the morning. Like, this is not like you're just like, just try to like wrap things up, close it down, deal with it in the morning. And I think that's kind of served me well.
And all the grandiose ideas you have that you're going to do the next day, that you wake up the next day and you're like, we're not doing that.
There's a lot of that. Even my wife and I now, we have a joke, there's that marriage advice, don't go to bed angry. That's horseshit. That's awful advice. Just go to bed. You feel better in the morning.
Yeah.
You'll be like, this was stupid. What were we arguing about?
Yeah. And having a I don't know why we just had a baby come home from the NICU, and so we've had oxygen and all this stuff, and I was like, it just felt like we needed to just be together. All right, so we tried for 2 nights to just stay in the same room, and it was like, no, we're doing shift work, so it's like you go sleep and then come in here at 6 a.m. and then you're taking, like, we had to pass the baton.
Yeah. We did the same, and we pretty early on, we were neither daughter was in the NICU, so I can't even imagine kind of what that process is like. But we were very adamant on having the baby in the baby's room.
Oh,
pretty early. Like, the baby was never really in our room, and part of it is both places we were at, the house was a wall in between. Like, honestly, like, there are probably rooms where the baby was further from the parents than this setup, but it was just a different room. You could close the door, you had the monitor, like it was still reasonably close, and it just kind of kept that boundary early on that I think was helpful.
Good.
It's such like a mind fuck, right? Going through that stage. I remember the first time I tried to get our oldest daughter, she was 3 weeks old, in her crib. Like, she was in the bassinet. I was like, okay, let me put you in the crib. We hadn't even cleared it out yet. So I like moved half the stuff over. She didn't even fit in the whole thing. And then I didn't want to bother anyone if she screamed or cried. So I just slept on the floor of that room for that night of like, let's just see if we can get through this. So.
Yeah. The things you'll do for 45 minutes of sleep, or 20.
Yeah.
PK, it's worth it though. PK,
I'll take notes.
PK's like, everything I've been hearing from talking to Mace, I'm not having any kids.
No, I want kids. I'll take 6.
All right, so you call it the whipping boy of title. You mentioned that. What's the biggest misconception people have about title?
That you don't need it. I think is a big one. There's that you don't need it. That it's a rubber stamp. If there's no claims, is a big one. Even I had a lender today said, I've been in this industry for so many years. I've never had a single title claim. Right. And having been, I was like, well, I have, like, I've had, and it is a closed small claims rate. It's about 2%. but I think they don't really see. I think the problem is title comes in at the very end, right? And so many people are reliant on the transaction going smoothly, but don't kind of understand all the things that go into it. And I think right now, too, this is a good segue into technology, because there's always been kind of like the boogeyman that's going to render title insurance obsolete. E-closings, right? Going to remove a big need and a big cost of title insurance. Blockchain is going to totally revolutionize property records. Everything's going to be a secure transaction. You don't need a person to go and do any work anymore, right? Attorney opinion letters are the next thing that's going to totally revolutionize title, right? And render it obsolete. AI, right? So there's always been something that's basically going to drive the title industry out of business. And it doesn't, to this date, hasn't really come to fruition. So
there was a company a couple years ago, I think, maybe I shouldn't say the name, but I'm not like fully aware if there's any like bad reputation or anything like that. But I think it's called Doma. They were doing title, and I think they had like some sort of like, automated platform or something along the lines of that.
I forget if they're still public. Yeah, and then they bought a major underwriter, and then I forget what exactly is going on with them now. But yeah, they were like they went the opposite route. Instead of like a big insurance company buying a technology company, they were a technology company that bought an underwriter. And I don't know, they were client for a little bit. I don't know enough about kind of what happened with that, and kind of the, I don't know if there was culture issues of kind of bringing in, the insurance folks with the technology folks. So, it's always tricky, because you're bringing in a company whose their job is to reduce risk, right? Like, you're dealing with $1 billion insurance company. All they're set up to do is reduce risk. And like, that's not how technology works. That's not how entrepreneurship works. Right. Like, so you kind of have to take risks, embrace it. And usually that's why I find a lot of the insurance companies don't really do technology well.
Well, so before we go into full tech, because I think it's going to take over the rest of the conversation, a lot of what you do is related to fees and states. What would you say are the most painful states that are just that were to get accurate?
New York.
There was no hesitation there.
New York's a pain. Like, a lot of lenders will be in 49 states and they won't touch New York, or someone will only be in New York. It's super duper complicated, I would say. Maryland, a lot of the Mid-Atlantic. I have a theory, like on the East Coast, the states are smaller, so and they're older, right? So it's just like you have a lot of really like complicated laws and different things there. But then there's pockets throughout the country that are kind of confusing too. Like Allegheny County around Pittsburgh has a lot of like very like township specific quirks. Cook County by Chicagoland is another one that's really weird. California, LA County, like there's some other pockets there that are confusing. So it's just a lot of things that you don't really think you have to know about fees, right? And I think that was one thing that I realized when I was on paternity leave with my first, was I was on a call with one of our larger clients at the time, and then they got to the point where they were asking us about all of this fee stuff, right? And you know what happens when you start a business. Early on, people sign and you're like, wait, why are you signing with us? Like, you really trust us to do this, right? Like, it's kind of imposter syndrome. And then we were going through the call and they were asking us about who pays owner's policy, all of these things. And it just hit me. I was like, oh, we're the experts. Like, we know more about this than our clients, because this is all we do, right? So that was really helpful, because that really informed what our kind of company vision still is. And a lot of our marketing is, we're the closing cost experts. Right. Yeah. So you don't have to be. So it's also another way of saying, Mace, that like taking time off now is helpful, because it gives you like that space that you need to come back. Like, both times I took time off when my daughters were born, I came back and my job was totally different. It was great. It's like, that was what turned me into a CEO.
Yeah. To take your hands off the wheel. Luckily, I'm in a spot where, if they're, I think only person might listen to this is Sean. They don't need me anymore. So it's a great way to be. It is funny though, Jim, when I was consulting, I remember as I kept getting to the bigger prestigious clients, what brought me to Salt Lake was Academy Mortgage. And then I remember being like, okay, I'm consulting for Academy now. They're going to have their shit together. And then it was like, within just like 2 days, I was like, whoa. And now, they're ever at Guild now. So they can't get offended. But I'm like, you guys don't have your shit together. I'm over here talking to the chief compliance officer and like running circles around them. But
yeah, well, there comes the moment where you're still waiting for the adults to come into a room and make decisions, right? And then you realize there aren't any adults.
Right. Yeah. The first time,
Yeah.
We're going to segue sideways a little bit again, but the first time when I had my first gym, there was that badass nurse that comes in. She's got their short hair with her flare everywhere, and she's just the awesome nurse, right? And she's like, here's this, here's the diapers, and here's this, and then she's like, and then here's the remote, and like, let us know if you need anything. And she walked out, and that was a moment that hit me. I will never forget that moment in my life. It was like, I'm really an adult now.
Yeah.
Like, you take care of that thing.
I remember when we were bringing our first home from the hospital, and my mother-in-law was there, and she was like, "Oh, I wonder if she has a diaper," and she went and she smelled it. I was like, "Wait, you can tell?" And then like later, I'm like, "Oh yeah, like you can yeah." And not just poop, like you could tell if there's a diaper.
So leading us into the tech part of this, I wrote this. So last week's the guest before you gets to ask the question, and I told you who you're going to ask a question at the end of this. But Sean, who you worked with Sean Foltz. He was actually the guest last week or 2 weeks ago, and so he was wanting to know how are you utilizing AI in any sort of way, even internally, externally, part of your business? Like, how is Lodestar, and also personally? So from a company perspective, but then also, how is Jim? Are you like me, ChatGPT parenting?
Not really. No ChatGPT parenting. I think quite frankly, as like a personal technology user, I'm not an early adopter of technology. I'm just not. Like, I use ChatGPT for certain things, and like it worked well for that. Like, for example, I was getting a car lease on the company, and they asked me for, I need a board approval form that you can get a car. And the board is me and my co-founder. So I just went on ChatGPT and then whipped one up, and it was fine, right? So like, those types of things. We're using it in a bunch of different ways. We have an AI tool that's being tested by our clients now that we're formally going to start marketing in the first quarter. And it basically is really an extension of our product. It takes, we had clients come to us with a problem that, a purchase contract can be 2 pages, it can be 20 pages. And what happens is there's one line in the purchase contract that says the buyer should pay the seller's transfer taxes. And if a person reading that misses that one line, that's going to be $3,000, right? In tolerance tiers. Doesn't happen often, but when it is, it's very expensive. So that's kind of the first problem we're trying to solve, is eliminate the need to manually go through and look for that information, because it's something AI can do really well, is that data intake, look for patterns, look for sentences that kind of look like this, and then highlight that. And then we have the added step, right, of then getting the fees that we know, putting them in the right spot and guaranteeing them.
So right now that happens manually?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
So you have to read the document, find the spot, move it over, and then do all of that.
So it's like Control F for like common phrases.
Maybe. I think they read there's a lot of other things that you need to look at in a purchase contract. So I think, quite frankly, like, they're going to be read regardless, but this is just kind of a fail safe to be able to check that. Because from talking to clients, it probably happens about 1% to 3% of the time that it gets missed. But every time it's a few $1,000s. So we have, decent, mid-sized mortgage company clients. This is a $20,000 a month problem for them. So it's very specific what we're trying to solve. But it's something that I think is a good extension of our tool. And then, and the company, we have kind of a self-identified AI czar, our product manager, and we tasked him with looking at different processes that we have. And I wanted to see, what does someone do at least 10 hours a week, and how can we replace that or minimize that with AI?
Makes sense.
So that's part of it. Personally, like I said, for emails, ChatGPT, things like that, I haven't gone too far into it, to be honest, with like using agents. There's probably more I could be doing, but it's just not.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's like Sean is our, we have our AI channel in Slack that PK's in. We've got founders in there. We've got people from Meta in there. Everybody how they're using AI every day. And PK can tell you, Sean Foltz is probably one of the most, probably knows more. He's a 0.1% most knowledgeable person about AI probably on the planet. And I'm like, I don't even try to keep up anymore because he's like yesterday, like he's like, oh yeah, so I've been playing with the new Gemini thing and blah, 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 blah. I'm coding with this and I'm doing these agents and we've got a Ubuntu server and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm not even trying anymore. Like I forced him into that world and then he just left me in the dust. So,
no, there's definitely people like that who want to build those things and do that. And I recently read a book about AI I really like called Reshuffle, and it was basically about how AI is changing knowledge work. I probably told you about it last time we talked, PK, and it was really interesting because it basically, one of the points of it is like AI, automation. AI makes automation better, but that's not the point of AI, right? The point of AI is to connect disparate systems. And like, there's a lot of people who are using AI to automate tasks, but they're not actually looking at all the steps in the ecosystem and if that still has to remain the same. Right. Mm-hmm. So I talked a lot about this when I was at MBA Annual. It seems like people are just basically like, oh, let's get the 52 steps of originating a mortgage and do them all twice as fast. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. That's more what that's I think what a lot of people are doing, as opposed to saying, okay, how can we actually change this so we don't have 52 steps? How can we cut that number in half? How can we cut that number by 90%, right? And then do those things faster. So how is this going to reimagine kind of the ecosystem? And quite frankly, I don't think that many people want that to happen, which is part of the problem. So it's I think going to be really interesting to see what happens there. Another point that the book brought up that I thought was really interesting, and PK, you'll like this because it's around constraints. As they said, in looking at a system and applying AI, what becomes the new constraint, right? So like, for example, our application removes the need for someone to manually go through and, the time constraint that existed to remove to look at a document. But now there's a risk constraint, right? Because AI is probabilistic. It's not necessarily saying, oh, this is the right place to do it, right? So what we're, I was actually talking to a company that does AI in the space, and they were very adamant on saying that we're not going to be the asshole, right? Like, we're not going to be the person who verifies that this is going to be accurate, right? With Lodestar, when it comes to fees, we're already the asshole, right? So if we get fees wrong, they're coming to us for cures anyway. So we're actually removing that risk constraint by then guaranteeing the data on top of what the AI tool is. So we're using AI to remove risk in the transaction, opposed to kind of developing an AI tool for the sake of developing an AI tool. So I think that's one thing that's interesting. The book also talks about, for example, radiologists, right? Is AI going to replace radiologists? No, it's the short answer, because it replaces the need for someone to identify a tumor on a photo, right? AI is very good at that. But, you trust AI for an answer on an email on your homework. Would you trust AI for a tumor? Right. So like, ultimately it comes down to a person to then take that information, make a diagnosis, and then help with the treatment plan. Right. So like, it's changing what a radiologist does, but it's not necessarily replacing them.
Getting rid of them. Yeah.
So that was kind of, despite not a ton of personal adoption on AI, I am very interested on how it's changing things and how we're kind of implementing it as a company. And also, I think any founder in technology has to think like, will this replace what I'm doing?
Yeah. I have a question, kind of like a line of thought I want to explore. So you said like let's say there's 52 steps today to originate a mortgage. Yeah. Instead of saying, hey, how can we get how can we get rid of 90% of these steps and make it 12 steps, let's say? What the current state of thought is, how can we just do these 52 steps as fast as possible, maybe double the current speed, right? I think the common fear is, if we go from 52 steps to 12 steps, my gut reaction says is that people's kind of thought process is, that means I'm not going to have a job anymore. There's nothing going to be left for me to do. Yeah. But in reality, my thought process is, if there's a reduction of 40 steps in the current way of doing it, there's new and better ways we can serve the end borrower in this situation that we currently are not serving today. And that allows us to have a competitive edge. So there's a new value adds and new edges that we can develop that are specific to our company. And if we free our people from the current task, these 52 steps, then we have an opportunity to do, provide a service that doesn't exist today in the market, and ultimately get a bigger market share and do it at more cost effective.
Yeah, I think that's the way to think of it at the end of the day. And generally technology has always created more jobs than it's eliminated, right? It's eliminated certain types of jobs, but then there becomes other jobs from there. Like, for example, I mentioned typewriters earlier, right? There used to be a typist who were paid to type, and they type very quickly and accurately. Then word processors came along, and we still type all the time, and typists are probably still faster than any of us at typing. But the problem now is if you make a mistake typing, you hit backspace, right? That's what word processors did. They eliminated the cost of the mistake. So that meant the value of typists went away. But think of all the other jobs that computers have then created since then, right? So I think that's part of it. I also think that that's generally a short-sighted way of looking at it. And that was one thing the author really debunked, the idea of a common saying is AI won't take your job. Someone who knows AI will, right? And ultimately, no, the system is just kind of going to get reimagined, right? In many cases, whether you try to protect those jobs or not. So I think that's one thing that's important. And this may be cynical, but looking at how a lot of industries work and how mortgage works with other technology, someone's going to figure it out, and then everyone's just going to follow suit. I mean, Mace has been around enough. You remember the Super Bowl ad with Rocket Mortgage, right? Most people couldn't spell POS before that happened, and then everyone needed one the next day. So, those are always going to be things that someone is going to do this, and then everyone's just going to then kind of be running to catch up.
I'm sure both of you guys have also seen this, which is with all these new technologies that are developing and companies bringing it to market, there's the old guard, which is maybe let's say closer to retirement, and they're like, hey, I just want the next 3 years of this to be the same way I've done everything the last 40 years, and I don't want things to change. So it's I think there's a internal resistance at sometimes when it comes to tech, where it's the junior people are all like, hey, we want this piece of tech, but the senior people are like, hey, I don't know I don't want to spend the next years of my life trying to figure out how the system works and deal with all the problems. And so I don't know, that's something I've noticed just going through a sales process ourselves, where, but then again, there's also folks that are been in the industry and they see the value of tech and they're like, yeah, we want to deploy this full on and get the most out of it.
I think over time you get numb to see is this just another new thing that's not going to change anything or something revolutionary, right? I remember. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Jim.
Early on, I was calling someone to sell a website widget, and the title company said, "Oh, our owner doesn't really like the internet." 2014. So I remember that. I have a very good family friend who is an entrepreneur, super successful over the years, angel investor. I was talking to him about AI, and he said, "Yeah, it's just like faster coding. There's always been some version of this. This is just faster coding, right?" And kind of, right? That's looking at it from an automation perspective, but I think that is actually kind of missing the point. So I have noticed that depending on the age of the person you talk to, you get very different answers around AI.
Yeah. I also feel like what's funny is because we were early to earlier than most. Last October of 2024 was when we were investing into local servers and AWS grant and a Google grant and all that. And it was funny when working with AWS, where there's a point they're like, oh yeah, you guys can already say that you use Bedrock and you can say that the solutions you build are utilizing this level of AI. There's a certain line they're like, so you can say that now. And we're like, okay, whatever. So we're working on some stuff and they're like, oh, okay, yeah. You'd be surprised at how many companies just want to get to a certain point where they can say that AWS says that they are using AI in their platform. But then there's some of these guys I've found too, Jim or PK, the opposite is there's some boomer at the helm going, we need to throw AI at this. And it's well, and I think that's another one, or maybe you're seeing this, Jim. And we're getting people asking us if AI can do stuff that is we could have done this 10 years ago. Can you use AI to go get fees, Jim, and put them into our LOS? That's what we do.
Yeah. No, you see, I saw a post on LinkedIn that made me laugh. Someone said, "Oh, we changed all of our prompts from loading to thinking, and now we're an agentic company." Right. So, like, I think there's always going to be a little bit of that, right? People doing AI for the sake of saying it versus like finding a problem, which is the way I like to think that we went about it is we found a problem that AI can help us solve, right? So it's a feature. We're removing risk with the help of AI. We're not implementing AI for the sake of implementing AI. And I think you're seeing a lot of that, like any technology that people rush to, they're trying to figure out. I want to kind of hop on the buzz, right? All of the blockchain real estate companies, and ultimately, like, you just needed a secure ledger of transactions. You don't need blockchain to do that, right? So,
yeah. Well, I think there's some
people don't understand the problem they're solving for, right? They just get the hammer and try to find a nail.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people that get frustrated. Like we're already finding that we are paying, I call it the ex-boyfriend, because like, oh, well, we already tried to play with AI, and we're like, well, we actually know what we're doing. And this was OCR experienced that. Like I remember working with PRMI, and it was like, we're not messing with any more OCR. Like we've wasted millions of dollars. Like it's, but we're like, but now I actually think it's good. And they're like, we're just done. Like, I don't even want to touch it.
We see that with implementations, right? People have like, I've been burned before, so I'm nervous to implement any new technology. Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you got a healthy take on it, Jim.
We'll see.
I love the candor you said earlier. And you were like, I made every mistake. Whenever you're going along the way, like, what was your favorite failure?
That's a good question. My favorite failure. I posted about this a while ago. I had, I think ultimately it's just like it takes time to figure out what the right room is to be in, right? So I used a lot of like personal connections, like most people, like people I knew, to try to get into sales situations. So I was in a New Jersey title agent continuing education course. And it was like people were there for CE credits. They were there afternoon into evening. It was about probate. So about like basically dealing with properties and people's wills. And just from like begging and borrowing, like I got to present during dinner time. Right. So I drove down there with one of the co-founders. We had all these pamphlets. We handed everything out. I got up there to speak and I said, thank you all for having me. I've been dying to speak to you all. Audible groans. No one really cared. They're eating their dinner. It wasn't important. It just wasn't the right target audience, right? And then I remember everyone left, and like 90% of our pamphlets, handouts were still there. And I just paid to print them, so we just picked them up, and we were like, okay, well, we'll move these on to the next thing. So, but like, unless you go into those rooms and figure it out, you won't kind of find what the right place is.
Right.
That sounds like a fun story.
Yeah, that was one. And then another one that me and my CTO joke about all the time is we were on a call with a vendor, and we were, it was a potential partner, and they were talking about like trying to get a sense of like, well, at what point, like, does your price drop, or at what point would you be able to do stuff, like trying to get a sense of scale of like, oh, at what point would this make sense? And like, without any really context, I just blurted out 2,000. And they just laughed. Everyone just kind of laughed. They're like, all right, well, you're full of shit. So every time me or our CTO don't know what we're doing, we're just like 2,000.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
2,000.
But what about you? What comes to mind? I'm sure you guys still have a couple.
Well, as soon as you told that story, I immediately went to, it was 2013. I was in the war room of a community bank. Yeah. And it was like it was a Texas community bank too. They intentionally made this room like the table was huge. So two people sat at the end of the table, and it was just like they called it the war room. They're all proud of it. And I'm consulting. We turned their mortgage division around. They were losing money, and we turned it around actually. But and then we started getting interest from the bank president and all that. And so we had this big meeting, and I say, there's a plethora of things that, and then I said it again. All right. And I was like, plethora. And then like, so go through all this.
Yeah.
And this sweet girl comes up to me afterwards and she goes, hey, I don't know if you know this, but it's plethora. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Our director of revenue, Elena, when she started, we were on a call with a client at one point, or a potential client, and they were talking about our billing and everything. And she was sitting right here. She was like, oh yeah, we bill in the rear. instead of inner ears. I told the story, but I feel okay doing it. So call hangs up. I was like, okay, so we bill in arrears, right? So that was one of my favorite all time mix-ups. So plethora isn't that bad.
Yeah, I feel like I'm still making my mistakes. So like, we'll have to
We all
like.
are. Once you stop making mistakes, you're too cocky. So then
Yeah,
you really
in the early days, one thing we did was, and I've written about this before. As Mace knows, I just call up people, or like find like ways to kind of reach out to people.
yeah.
I don't know which one I can share. I'll share about the foot one, but basically, I was I mean I again, not from the mortgage industry initially, right? So I would just kind of learn lessons from other founders that are doing all kinds of other stuff, and I've come across this founder who made a candle in the shape of a foot. So he would create these large candles in the shape of a foot, and he had like 15 clients that he wanted to land. So he would just mail these to people, and then with like a handwritten letter and like explain why he wants to talk to them. And like it's such a weird gift and weird and
He wasn't
quirky
trying to
gift.
sell the foot candles. He was selling something else. That was just
He was selling something else.
This was the pattern
whole thing
interrupt.
was- yeah, the pattern interrupt. Just like I just want to get my foot in the door.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, great, I'll steal that one. And then like I went on Etsy and found a bunch of little feet.
I better get a foot candle.
Your search history has already been fried. Foot guy. Keep going.
I like that one a lot. Yeah, better get a foot candle after this. I remember I talked to someone at a conference where it was kind of to your point before. I was talking about how we can like save time in getting fee quotes out and all of that. He's like, well, like, what's my staff going to do? Just like sit around and scratch their butts all day? Right. And like, it's kind of people's misunderstanding of like how to like use time when it gets saved. If that's how you think of your staff, like that's a bigger problem. I tried emailing him after the conference a couple of times, never responded. So I eventually new email, subject line, butt scratching software. And then we signed a couple of weeks later. So
I love it.
the pattern interrupter, my favorite subject line of all time. So
I had a CEO once, and I won't name names, but he said, well, other than no longer having tolerance cures and increased efficiencies, what is the value of your software? And I sat for a second, and then one of his like the people on his team started ripping him. They're like, "What are you talking about with this?" And it was actually detrimental because then he kind of got mad. But I have seen. We had one person when our workflow product after our free trial say like, we don't want to move forward. And it was like, okay, wow, we had our first person not moving forward. Like, can you tell us why? And they're like, it'll eliminate Mark and Tammy's department, and it'll eliminate more. They're like, we don't want to do any more layoffs. And I was like, oh, okay. It's an interesting one.
I've been on those calls too, where I'm talking to someone and it's the person who manages the fee templates.
Oh.
And you're like, all right, well, this person's never gonna like bring us in. Like it's and usually people are like, oh, like there's other stuff to do. And like also as managers and employers, you're like, hey, like good employees work themselves out of a job, and then you just go and find a new problem for them to solve. So a lot of people don't necessarily act that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a detrimental mindset. Right.
What do you think is an innovation that you hope that the industry will embrace in the next 5 years? So, we had COVID to thank for e-closing. Like there's no way e-closing would be, I think COVID just put a 15-year skip button on e-closing, but
I mean, maybe I still feel like it's not that prevalent even still, but
still, right.
Yeah. I feel like it's taken a step back. But what I would like to see in the next 5 years, I mean, you've bought a home, right? You work in the industry. Were you ever confused in the home buying process?
Well, I breathed mortgage though, so I knew my loan and all that.
Still weren't confused at any point. Like I live in this industry. I've bought 2 homes, and I'm still confused going through the process with all of the paperwork and all of the things I'm signing and having to explain it to my wife and step through the process. Like I think my biggest thing is it's still a really confusing, slow process. I know a lot of friends who are very educated in finance, wouldn't even feel comfortable with an adjustable rate mortgage, right? Like just don't understand it that well. And the realization I had buying a home in the last year, I was one of those idiots that traded in a 3.8 interest rate for a 6.1, just because it served our family better. It was the house we want to be in for long term. So all that complexity is a moat, right? Like that. No, like most of the individuals in the industry, your realtor, your loan officer, your title agent, your real estate attorney, they don't really want, it doesn't necessarily work in their best interest for things to get less complex. Kind of like what you were talking about, right? With Mark and Tammy's department going away, right? So like, the complexity is a moat in this industry. It protects people because when things are really complex, you need experts, right? You need experts to buy a house, to buy a car, to, invest in some cases, like do all these different things, right? So like, I would love to see that complexity go down. I have no idea what that ever is going to look like. I don't think that's ultimately realistic, because I think unless the situation I mentioned happened where some company, not going to be me, quite frankly, but like someone is able to at scale completely change the process and eliminate complexity, and everyone else is forced to follow suit. It's the only way that I see happen, right? There's going to be some first mover who streamlines and figures out a way of making the process so much more simple that like you have to adopt or get out of the business. And I don't think that's very likely. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the number of people that have contacted me about buying a home, and then I would have to show them a rate spread and then explain to them. And I had a Google Doc that I used to use before, and then I kind of vibe coded something. And we go offline and talk about this, but I was like, I reduced what the rate options were to two little bars. One was closing costs and one was payment, and then you drug your payment down and you saw your closing costs go up, and then they put them on a graph so you could see the break-even point. It's like, oh, this makes sense. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and decrease my closing costs by little points here. My payment just went up, but it looks like that'll make sense at 5 years. I don't want to be in this house that long. And like, you got to explain it that way. It has to be more. You have to put the Steve Jobs on mortgage.
Yes, but the amount of knowledge you had to have to create the easy button, right? Like,
right.
These decades.
Right.
Yeah. Sounds like y'all need to write a book.
PK, what if like you right now, you're dipping your toes in the mortgage industry, and like, would you, if you were going to go get a home, what would you do? Who would you start with? Who would you call? Like, what are your fears right now, or what are your like kind of like your unknowns that you have in the back of your brain about buying a house?
That's a great question. This might be controversial. Personally, I don't like want to own a house, like at least not right now. Like I'm kind of like I like the optionality of just renting and being like, okay, tomorrow I want to live in Salt Lake City, but for whatever reason, let's say 6 months from now, I'm like, okay, I actually want to be in, I don't know, Florida, Tampa. Like if you own a house, you got to deal with all this like asset that you got to sell, and all that. And so to me, that feels like mental burden. I don't know if everybody else in my age group feels like that. I'm more like that, like I don't know if you guys have heard about like how like millennials and like Gen Zs care about more about experience versus like ownership. I think when it comes to home ownership, I kind of fall into that bucket where it's like, do I want to be tied down to like one specific state and location and all that? To me, that feels like a negative. I don't think all my friends feel like this, but I personally feel like that. So like, unless I was like married to like a specific state or location, I don't see myself like buying a house anytime soon. But I do have friends who have bought homes, and they're like on the family track of like starting a family, having kids. They've got 2 W-2 jobs, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I bought my first house at 35, right? And it wasn't until we, moved to the area, we wanted to raise kids, had kids. It was actually right as my wife was going back to work after maternity leave, right as interest rates were rising. So it was not a good time to buy. And she's like, oh, I think we should buy a house now. Right. And like we were, so yeah, like it wasn't until that point where we were ready to be like, okay, we'll settle down, we'll get a starter house, we'll figure out what makes sense. And I was already 10 years into a business, so I was stable enough for those things to make sense.
Yeah, I don't think that's controversial at all, PK, by the way. Like, I think it's smart, self-aware, right? Don't just take Dave Ramsey, like, you must own a home. Like,
well, also, I think, like, you know, having owned 2 homes now, like, it's a pretty crappy investment. Like, if you're trying to make money, don't own a home, because you're generally not going to make money on your primary residence, right? You'll save money from renting, but like, it's not going to long-term make you money. If you look at the taxes and the cost and all of the other things that you have to put into it. You know, I know people, you know, you probably know a lot, Mace, who brag about how their home's appreciated. I'm like, that's all well and good, but like, you're not going to do anything with that. You're not going to move for 20 years, right? And like, maybe you'll borrow some money off of it or something like that, but it's not really helping you. Like, it's not like, you know, it's something you can brag about, but like, you know, it's not an asset like that serves you. It's not like something like a business or investment properties or something where you're actually making money without having to do any work, right? Or well, making money once you've done all the work up front, and then it's a recurring revenue stream.
Totally.
Right? So that's ultimately what you want to build, right? To build wealth, and a lot of people don't do that. So
right. I think like when you own a house, you have to deal with all the problems of when it breaks, like the roof breaking, plumbing, blah blah blah. So like, to me, I don't know again if this is just the phase of life I'm in, but like all of that sounds like headaches that I just don't want to deal with.
Dude, I think there are some. I joke about the people that love to own a house just because it's something to do. Like whenever we bought our house, I was like, I'm not owning a lawnmower ever. Like I'm not mowing my yard. And like, and if things go wrong, I'm like, I paid for someone to do this. Like, I did have to build a pony wall out in my house. Well, that's another topic. But like, I'm like, hey, like, just because nobody would take the job. It's so small after COVID. Everybody's spending money and having contractors are like, I'm not doing that unless you're gonna, you know, it needs to be like 20 grand. But anyway, like I'm like, I'm playing a plumber. Like, oh, you could have put your water system in yourself. And I was like, but I don't want to. Like he's like, me and my buddy did it. We bought a 12-pack and we, you know, started in the morning. We were done by the end of the day. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. Like, 100%. How much money did you save? You know, like,
not a lot, right? And like, well, you know, it's all dependent on how you value your time too.
Yeah, time is money. Yeah.
I do mow my lawn, but not that well. So.
But I think, but I think it's also certain people that like it. Like if you're enjoying that getaway time, that's one thing. But if it's like, you know,
or like when I'm doing that stuff around the house, like I'm an avid business book person, right? So I'm listening to business books or things like that. Like, and you know, we could go down that rabbit hole a little bit more too with things. But I think PK, one thing you'll realize too is like you're at the point where it's like growth, get ourselves situated. But once you're further along the journey, you actually get to experience some sort of flexibility of like, you know, Mason said it like, oh, they don't really need me there. Right? Like you're probably pretty needed at your organization right now. So like once you get to a point where you're not, then you have a lot more flexibility and your priorities can change a little bit. So, you know, that's one of my favorite things about where I'm at. My co-founder, we have 5 kids, all 5 years or younger between the 2 of us. So, you know, the flexibility of the job is really important right now.
Right.
I actually had a side-by-side picture that we put up at our company retreat. It was the 2 of us at a club in like 2011, 2012, and then the 2 of us sitting with our 5 kids on the couch. It was like things have changed. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are coming up on time, and Jim, so you are asking the question for next week's guest, which is Lori. Lori Helms from Loramac.
So what is the most common mistake that lenders make when it comes to technology?
Ooh.
My question.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
I feel like hour.
I know. I feel like we could riff for a while.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot more fun when it's less professional.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, we had a plethora of things to say.
All right. Well, I'll bill you in the rear. Thank you for your time. Sorry, Elena. Thank you.